Welcome to SparkHub. Whoever you are and whatever you're going through, it's my deep-seated belief that stories are what get us through daily struggles and ultimately find new sparks of inspiration in life. So it's my aim with this podcast to create a hub of stories, everything from cautionary tales to quite inspiring feats, all in one place, and much more. Every episode has show notes that dive deeper on the topics we discuss, and if you want an extended experience, please consider signing up for the SparkHub newsletter for exclusive content and behind-the-scenes stuff. It's also my belief that if no one ever listens to any of these episodes, I can leave behind stories for my kids so that they can find sparks in their own life as they grow up. So now that all that throat clearing is done, let's begin. My name is Alan, and I have a heck of a story for you. So in this episode, I kind of go back in time to someone I've known for a while and someone I worked with who is very innovative. His name's Dino, and we're going to go deep on artificial intelligence in this episode. We're going to cover a lot of things, from value to history to energy consumption. And I hope to come out with a nice outcome, because every day I wake up like everyone else and I'm plagued by the thought of, could it go to hope and abundance, or could it go another direction entirely? So without further ado, enjoy the conversation with Dino Burbidge. So, Dino, welcome to SparkHub. Now, I'm going to open with a historical artifact. I'd like you to look at something, see if you recognize that.
How exciting.
So, for those watching the video, we'll just show up. You'll see what Dino's looking at. For those on audio, he's holding a picture of himself from November 2022, titled Dino Burbidge, How and Why to Learn Everything. Do you remember that?
I do remember that, yes.
So
I still stand by that title.
Great. So nothing's changed in 4 years.
No.
You've remained consistent.
55 years, nothing's changed.
So the reason I showed you this is because I started SparkHub a while ago, and you were one of my first guests. In fact, episode 21 to be specific. And back then I was trying to do something around education. It was kind of post-COVID times. You know, the world had flipped on its head. And then SparkHub went on pause for a while, and let's call it, that was season 1, just for fun. Season 2, I did another 25 episodes about being a divorced entrepreneurial father. You weren't on that season. But season 3 is what we're doing now, and I was convinced to do it on camera because it might be a better presentation. So all to say, you were part of history. That was a historical artifact. And now you're back here again 4 years later saying nothing's changed, but I think everything has changed. So
Everything has changed.
in 4 years.
Every 4 years.
Let's start with, what exactly do you do?
Now?
Yeah.
Okay.
What have you historically done, and what are you doing now?
Okay, the very quick history of that started as a designer. So that's my base history, graphic information design.
And I think that's how we met, because we worked together in the agency market.
Yeah, broadly speaking, that took me to agencies. I mean, I started off at the BBC making CD-ROMs. I was actually in a meeting today, and they mentioned CD-ROMs. I was like, no way, where is that? And you went, BBC. I went, no way, same. So there's a lot of love going on still for CD-ROMs. But, you know, then went into Disney, where I was head of creative technology for Europe, which basically meant the internet as it was back in the day. And that was like year 2000, something like that. And then where did I go from there? Then the agency that was doing a lot of work for Disney then needed a creative director. So I went there because you do better work when you're not at Disney for Disney. So you get to work on the movies.
So distance helps perspective.
Yeah, which is where we met, obviously. Yeah. So, and then from there...
I think I snuck you in the back door of another agency.
And music startup as well. You know, I always go, great learnings, wouldn't ever do it again. Then went into the toy world, actually just around the corner from where we're recording this, for Moshi Monsters, if you remember that.
I remember that.
Yeah, so if you watch the movie, I'm on the credits. It was miscellaneous marketing or something. And from there, went into the big agency world, like proper TV agency, advertising, as an innovation and technology director.
It's a hell of a title, though.
Yeah, I probably fumbled it. But that basically meant, you know, you've got telly, print, radio, and billboards. And what do we do with them that's a little bit above? How do we add innovation to those? And from there, I then went, one of our clients was Sky, and we were kind of used to do the stuff that Sky kind of felt difficult to do, because big companies find it hard to do the small stuff. and their website was one of the small stuffs they couldn't quite do. So we were part of the team that did that. And eventually I went over to Sky, and they had a great offer, which I couldn't refuse, which was, would you like to run and found the innovation lab over at Sky? 30,000 people, industrial scale innovation. How do you get everybody singing, from the hymn of innovation over at Sky, and then latterly Comcast as well. So, and then from then, obviously, what have I done since then? Couple of years consultancy on my own, and then I'm now the chief innovation officer of a brilliant agency called Little Dot Studios, who monetize YouTube content.
What a hell of a wayward journey, eh?
Yeah, so
that's why you should learn everything.
Yeah, I mean, which we'll come on to, I guess, but really every time there's something that changes, there's usually we need to know more. We need somebody who's at least nimble enough and pliable enough to sit within us, not be an idiot, but help us get over this new thing. And the new thing right now is AI, obviously, but previously it was everything from CD-ROMs to the internet to gaming to advert gaming to you name it.
Everything shifted, eh?
All of those things that we've now forgotten, all the things that were going to take over the world, and never quite did.
Is it different this time, though? I guess that's the first question.
It is and it isn't. So.
But yeah, I suppose one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, this, just from a personal standpoint, this is kind of season 3, and I'm kind of calling it evolution. So if you think of season 1, I was dabbling around. We did our first episode. Then my circumstances changed and got divorced, and my whole life was shaken up. And I'm sort of now coming out of that and looking towards the future. So I'm now thinking of evolution. What do I teach my kids? How does school work? How does work work? How does life work? How does the planet work? And I suppose I remember you describing yourself when we first met as you said you're perfectly one half designer and perfectly one half coder. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I probably said one half code, one half design, and one half strategy.
Yeah, and I think it doesn't add up, but it adds
exactly.
up. It's a conundrum, the Dino Rubik's Cube.
Yeah. Take that.
So you can over-index where you need to at the right time. At the right
exactly.
place.
Yeah. Just make up stuff when you need to and then wing it.
So as I'm coming out of this tunnel, I suppose the big question is, what should I be thinking about with artificial intelligence? You and I had a conversation not long ago surrounded by motorcycles, I remember, where you sort of shocked me and excited me at the same time, because it seems to me you could have two sides to this. There's this hope and abundance world, utopian world, where we just have to look for meaning in our day. And then there's Terminator and Skynet. And you kind of took me on a bit of a journey between those two, but it could change any minute, couldn't it?
Yeah, it could do. Every 2 weeks it changes at the moment. I mean, just as an example, if you're into your models at the moment, it used to mean a different thing back in the 80s. Now it just means AI models. So if you were into your models and you were really scared about this big new Claude model coming out, Mythos, the model that was going to take down the world, and they said, we're not going to do that. So they put some sort of cufflinks on it and called it Fable, launched it 2 weeks ago. And then the American government within 3 days went, no, we're going to take that down. It's too dangerous. So nobody can get access to it. And then OpenAI said, well, okay, we're going to do our ChatGPT 5.6 because it's currently on 5.5, and that got taken down within a day as well. So now, so now this is the way the world works, which is the biggest models are coming out of at least America are now getting pretty much sort of legs swiped straight away. So that's an interesting thing. We didn't see that 3 weeks ago, and now we're seeing it all the time. So you have to keep thinking, okay, what's all that about? And then I always go higher and higher and higher. You go, well, what's all that about? And you go, well, it's really about a trade war. And if you are Chinese right now, what you do is you undercut all the American, all of the IPOs that are going on this year. You just keep releasing free models that do exactly what the Americans can do. So all of that, you could have a whole conversation for an hour about that, what's going on there. And I didn't even need to talk about that 2 weeks ago because it wasn't a thing. So really keep on your toes on the AI thing. So
I guess being curious is an asset.
Yes. I mean, you do need to get some work done in between the curiosity.
Yeah, of
course. But I would say, I mean, there's a lot, is AI going to take your job? And, what's it going to mean for the pliability of brains in the future and all that sort of stuff? I've got to say, there's so much I now have to learn and can learn because of AI. There's so much.
Can you outsource your curiosity? I mean, that'd be like, can you outsource can it do things for you that it goes away and it comes back, and in combination with the Dino brain, it can...
No, I mean, okay, this is the thing about AI, and let's call it creativity. Okay, let's go right back to that. Like, is AI creative? And first of all, is it conscious? Is it a god? No, right? There's this whole thing, which is, if you go back to the 70s or the 60s, you had a calculator and everybody thought that was like superhuman. It was artificially intelligent. It could do sums like you would not believe. And then we had computers, and then you had algorithms 10 years ago that were telling us things we couldn't even spot. These signals were coming out. We were, why didn't we see these things in scans or data? And now we have AI. And if you look back at algorithms, you don't think, wow, that's super intelligent. You just go, oh, it's just computers doing computer stuff.
Faster and faster.
Yeah, no, well, now we understand it. With familiarity, we just always regress to, well, it's just computers doing computer stuff. And what we saw right at the beginning of AI was lots of people saying it is sentient. And you go, no, it isn't sentient. It literally is just a prediction engine. All we've discovered is we've reached the current limit of where humans know what sentience is, and they can't understand what computers are now doing. And now we're a bit more down that road, and we all know about, well, some of us wang on about large language models, predictive models, and that sort of thing. And if you know how they work, you go, it's just putting one step in front of another, and it's choosing the most likely output of the next sentence, and it's just computers doing computer stuff. So that said, if it's putting the next word in front of the next word in front of the next word, and you ask it a question, let's ignore how it knows what that question means, but it's coming up with an answer. There is a literal thing in the algorithm called temperature. So if you're in an algorithm, if you're in a large language model, there is this thing. If you're in the back end of it, you can say temperature 0, and it will go, right, I'll be straight-laced. I'll just go straight through my neural network. I'll give you every single answer straight. Great. And if you then say, I'd like temperature 1, it'll go, oh, right, okay, I'll skip a few. I'll maybe jump a few lines, and, I'll give you things you didn't expect, just because statistically they're not the next natural thing. They're going to be 2 or 3 things away. And then, by the way, that then word will then trigger the next statistically little bit weird word. And all of a sudden you start getting really weird sentences and weird connections. And that's all you're getting, is you're getting statistically more weird connections that we see as being, oh, I'd never put those 2 things together. That's creativity. So when you look at creativity in AI, it is literally having every single option in front of you in a brainstorm and playing that game where you put random things together. And you go, wow, that's a great...
Is it 1,000 chimps and 1,000 typewriters exponentially, vertically and horizontally?
It's almost like infinite Post-it notes, pick 3. And make a sentence out of those. That sort of game where you've always got like, a thing and an action and a whatnot, and then you have to come up with an idea. It's just, it can do that.
Or like comedians that do improv, give me a word, a scene, and a color, and they come up with a...
Correct. Yeah.
So like that.
So I think that's the interesting thing, which is what we see as creativity, which is also when you say, well, what about curiosity? You go, what it can do is it can join things really bizarrely, and you go, well, that's interesting, and it sets you off on another planet basically when you're looking at things.
So it's like rabbit holes, but on a
yeah. So I will, like, even for today. Okay, so I'm trying to figure out, can we use Meta or X data for ad buying to add to our data to try and figure out whether we can look at audience cohorts, right? It's a really boring sentence, but basically, is there anything we can get from like an ad model that can tell us how many football fans are in Cardiff, for instance? With our data, we've got a view on football in Cardiff, and like, can we add them 2 together? So I'm like, I don't know. So you just go to your large language model and go, okay, this is what I'm trying to achieve. What do I need to do? And it says, well, you do realize there's an MCP server. You go, well, okay, what? So you then research that. You go, oh, that's amazing. Like, what can you do? And how do you connect that? And all of a sudden, I'm off on another Post-it note on my virtual wall that says I must really get my head into the MCP servers because they sound amazing. And as I walk away from that, there's just every day it's littered with new Post-it notes of, oh, that's interesting.
So you're presented with almost endless threads to tug on, aren't you?
Yeah, it's. Another example is we've got a waterfall. We've got a fish pond at home with a very small waterfall that keeps losing water, and we don't know what. And I've figured out it's when the water goes underneath one of the lips of and it clings to the lip, and it disappears behind one of the little waterfally bits. You go, oh, great. So I've just gone concrete, and I'll just postcrete I've got in the garage, and I've just made do the wall. Great. So I then go to ChatGPT or Gemini as it was, and go like, okay, How long do I need to leave this? And it goes, well, what are you using it for? And I go, I'm using it for a pond. And it gave me this whole like, well, you shouldn't, because it's going to put too much lime in the water. And if you've got any aquatic life in there, then the pH is going to rise or lower. And then you've got to put acid on it. So have you got any acid? I go, yeah, I've got some vinegar. And I go, yeah, dab some acid on it. So I've gone through this whole thing. And at the end of it, I went, whoa, hang on a minute. It's like 10 centimeters of concrete, right? The whole thing's made out of concrete.
Yeah.
Are you sure? And he went, no, you're absolutely right. No, you should be fine. But now I know all about pH balances in ponds and, what newts don't like. And, and that was a microcosm for about 20 minutes where I've now got this little thing in my head, which if I ever need to concrete a pool again, that's
At
where I
least you have
started.
it,
It's, whereas before I'd have gone, I just concreted it and turned on the tap. Would have been fine. So
it adds a lot of depth. Well, I suppose one question I have is everything you've just described, I would say, skews towards hope and abundance. It gives you hope with your pond and everything, but you travel a lot. Like when I last saw you, you're going to LA. I think you go to the Middle East as well a lot.
Yeah.
So you're getting a spectrum of people in your mind as you travel around the world to see things. But give me like a day or a life in the week. Sorry, a day or a week in the life of Dino going to these different locations. Are you seeing any common threads between the regions of the world?
I would say it's tricky. It's tricky.
For example, I hear that one time, and you tell me if I've got this right, and it could be different in 2 weeks, but AI was a very positive trend in America, which is a very innovative society. And now I'm seeing stats saying people actually want to disallow it, and sometimes on religious grounds and sometimes on personal grounds. And so you told me a fascinating story the other week about the Catholic Church. So what I'd love you to do is retell that story, because it struck me that as you travel, there's suddenly all these different roads you never imagined with AI.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that one was specifically you've got one thing going on in America, which is there's a lot of AI companies there. And I would say if you look at the globe and you spun it, I'd say China is probably ahead of the game right now. And I only mention that in terms of restricting AI use and labeling AI use. And they sort of, for better or worse, have grips on making sure people do what they want to do. Let's just put it like that. So they're saying, well, okay, we can't just have this open AI thing that is polluting minds and stopping people doing things. Great. And then you've got Europe, who are taking a very much, we're leading that way. Australia as well. So you've got things like the social media ban and all those sorts of things. And then you've got America, which is the Wild West, almost literally, where anything goes. So, and because it's anything goes, and you've got a very conservative base there, and you've also got, you've got the ends, you've got the West Coast, East Coast thing with lots of tech going on as well. So it's a very diverse country and populous as well. If you go to somewhere like the Middle East, they are still... So if you go to India, for instance, and you talk about digital billboards, which I know a fair bit about, they're still trying to get to the point where they've got a really good, coherent story to tell, where there's one or two big, agencies that you can go to. Other than that, they're all over the place at the moment. They're trying to get to that point. So you go, great. You go to America, they've got that sort of sorted, and they're onto different things. In America, there's a big thing at the moment where people are going, like, I see where this is all going and I don't agree with it, and therefore I don't have to use it. And then looking at things like workplace laws to then give them some protection against having to go ahead with this big corporate thing. And the big corporate thing, by the way, is big AI agencies, big AI companies, and I'm talking about Anthropic, and I'm talking about OpenAI, et al., XAI, Grok. They're all just trying to gain as much money as they possibly can right now, because they're all about to IPO. And there's a whole different story about
so that's a capitalistic engine versus a socialist or potential. If you go further,
quite frankly, don't give a stuff about the world and don't really give a stuff about anybody. And they said they did, but actually, as the dollar signs have started to glow, that's started to ebb away, it seems. So, and people are wise to this, and we're starting to see the new wave. So the thing about the papal, I can't remember the name of it, but it's got a very special, cool name. But the Pope has always been a little bit like, okay, I've got to do the right for the people of the planet and the faith, obviously. So he said, look, two things is AI is not necessarily a bad thing, but if you use AI for bad things, then that is against your Catholic faith. And therefore, in America, you have protections in the workplace that say that employers have to give reasonable adaptations to religious grounds. So if you need to pray, you're Muslim, whatever it might need to be, need to leave early, then you need to have...
So there's provisions for prayer rooms, there's
Exactly.
provisions for fasting,
Yeah.
there's provisions for...
Exactly.
Okay.
So therefore, the Pope has been pretty strong to say, look, if you work in a bank and somebody's saying you need to use AI to filter out the ones and the zeros a little bit easier, then fine, there's not an issue. But if you're working for a weapons company that is targeting, children's schools and that sort of thing, then yeah, AI is being used for bad, and that is against your Catholic faith, and therefore you can use that as religious grounds to object to doing the AI, whatever it is, in your workplace.
So that casts you very quickly into a legal framework that still hasn't adjusted.
So legislation will always follow invention. So I think we've had 4 years probably of filling your boots, whatever that means to whoever. But we're now trying to find out where the edges are, and we're starting to see. I mean, social media has taken a long time to get to the point where we're now legislating against it. AI, we've seen it actually become very dangerous very quickly, and therefore the legislation is starting to happen. Even shutting off those American models, Europe has gone, well, hang on a minute. Well, if our government is using those, then all of a sudden, and it goes, we are now at the behest of another country about what technology we can use and what facilities we have for our citizens. So if we have our ID system, which is based on an AI platform that can get turned off, we don't have an ID system anymore, and our borders don't work. Or our satellites, if you get a satellite that stops working or goes up by 1 degree, then your food doesn't arrive in the port, the airplanes don't land, deliveries don't happen. Everything grinds to a halt pretty quickly. So having sovereign AI, which is now what they're calling it, is a very important thing for countries, because now they've realised, I see where this is going. Now you can pull a lever. We're now vulnerable.
The switchboard has changed completely.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So I think that kind of let's all be nice to the AI companies is starting to go, hang on a minute. And we're starting to see another version of that, which is, well, when you want to use an AI, you go to your app, right? And you go to your website and you go to Claude or you go to chatgpt.com. You don't need to do that. So you can actually run an entire AI model from your laptop. You can run it from your phone. So, go and download the Google AI app on your phone. You can use the Gemma model on your phone. You literally download the model, switch off your internet. You can still use AI on your phone. So it can run on very small devices.
So it lives among us.
Well, the point is all of the cost, which is, I'm rambling a little bit, but all of the cost of AI that we're now starting to see is the token cost. So people have gone, right, yeah, fill your boots, become addicted to it, and then we'll start ratcheting up the cost of the tokens you're actually using. And if you're a coder, you're now dependent on it. We might start charging you quite a lot. And I think it was Uber. I think they went through something incredible. It's something like $2 million worth of tokens in a month, or $250,000 worth of tokens in a month. So that lots of companies have now said, like, okay, guys, stop using it, or at least limit your use. So that's number one.
So has that replaced trackable hours? Remember the old days we did timesheets?
I was at a company which I can't name 2-3 weeks ago, talking to the head of engineering, and they said we're now actually being measured on token use. And if you don't use enough tokens, it signifies that you're potentially not embracing AI as much as you should be, or you're not putting enough throughput through the models as you should be. So it's a little bit like how many lines of code did you write? Therefore, you're a good coder, which is an insane way of measuring code.
But does that disincentivize efficiency?
Oh yeah, no, it's totally right.
Just to give you a real world example, I had a relative once who took me out. I mean, we're going back to 2005, back in the day when agencies had big expense budgets, and he worked for a big corporate. We went out for lunch, and he got the bill, and he asked the waiter to add a zero. And the waiter said, "Why do you want to 10x your bill?" He said, "Because if I don't burn my budget, I don't get it next year. So therefore, I've rented hotel rooms that are sit empty, and I have meals where I keep adding zeros because I have to burn this budget." And I thought it was like, I just looked at it and I go, why wouldn't you be incentivized to spend less? But anyway, it sounds like similar.
So these local models, spool forwards 12 months, then, for instance, I've got a laptop, I've got a MacBook Pro M2 or something like that at home. Nothing special. It's got 16 gigabytes of RAM, and I can run a full video generation model on there, like LTX2, I can run that. Well, actually, on the PC, it runs totally on the machine. On the Mac, it does need an API call. But I can run all the generation pretty much on my machine. And that's video with audio. And I can do, music and whatever it is, just on my machine. So we've been sold this view that you do need the latest, biggest connected model to do anything. But actually, just download it to your machine. You can pretty much run on a Mac with 16 gigabytes, you can run an 8 billion parameter model, which I don't know about you, but when I'm doing work with AI, I don't need to know how to make a souffle or a meringue or the last 3 hits of ABBA. But that's what's in the model, that when they talk about it being a gazillion parameters, that's what's in the model. It's everything.
So it's killing an ant with a bomb.
Yeah, so small language models. So we talk about large language models, whereas actually the conversation should be specialist small language models that you download and you use just the energy that you have on your laptop to run it.
Well, let me come back to energy because I wanted to dive in on something there, but just quickly on the topic of value. So value from 2 perspectives. One is, what is the value of a token? And as you say, if you're working with someone or overseeing someone, what's good and what's bad in terms of token burn. But secondly, on the Catholic example, and possibly I'm assuming the Muslims will have a view on this as well, it's the value of a soul, which has always been the province of religion, isn't it? Every soul counts, every soul's valuable. It has put into play all our Judeo-Christian values across the West. It is the axiom upon which society is based, if you want to go that deep. It sounds like whether you're working for tokens or you're spiritual and religious, the whole axiom of value has changed. And I think that's what sort of scares me the most. One is as just someone who's, trying to see the hope and abundance in things, but also raising children. How do you prepare them? It used to be, I remember a couple of years ago, learn to code. I was like, oh, you got to learn to code. And I was putting so much pressure on my kids trying to at least understand what this means. And now I don't hear anything about it anymore because you can just write a prompt and it'll go and code for you and stuff like that. So I guess my point is, where do you see value propositions going in the right direction? For example, think back to, do you ever watch the movie RoboCop when you were younger?
Oh, yeah.
Where he had, what did they call it? In his vision, he had his priorities. They were called something. Protocols or priorities.
Yeah,
protect the innocent, arrest the bad, do not kill. And then he went haywire. So I remember seeing that movie, and I'm just wondering now, how do you make sure AI values human life to begin with and human, I guess, evolution and growth, but also how do you then value work output? Because I know it's a double-edged sword, but it sounds like that's a theme that's running across every region you visit.
Yeah, look, I mean, if you go to a cafe on the corner, they're not using AI. They sort of are, because they're probably using it in their spell check and all that.
CRM, for example.
Yeah, exactly. But realistically, at the moment, we're in a really weird place. There's some big megalomaniac, IPO crazy people who have got slightly destabilized visions of what good looks like. And let's just follow that forwards, by the way. If you then go, right, okay, I'm totally going to go to the end of the world and it's going to burn in flames in 5 years' time. But well, what's going to happen? Like, what are they going to do? So unless they're a nihilist and it's all just going to burn in flames, they're going to get on their private island and lock themselves in. Like, who's going to bring them stuff? And, what are they going to do? So it's like, once you've gone forwards a little bit, you go, wouldn't it be better to maybe do good stuff right now so we don't have to go to that vision? So the RoboCop, everything's in flames and,
Well, it's a dystopian, but it was because his priorities got scrambled.
Yeah, those priorities don't exist anymore. So the Asimov rules of robotics, which is like, do no harm and all that.
Sorry, directives. That's what they called them. He called them directives.
Yeah. So there was this, and we held it for a long time, that, robots will never harm a human. You go, and all you see is a robot dog with an AK strapped to the top of it, walking around, somewhere foreign. Then you go, oh, they've done it. And that can shoot anybody. And by the way, we've got drones and we've got lasers. And it's not been like that forever, really, as far as I'd known. There's always been technology that has been killing people.
Black Mirror style.
Yeah, so I think for me, we're already there, but I always hold state in it's not different this time. Like, it never has been different. There's a fallacy, which is it's different this time. So the computer, right? The washing machine, the home automation. It was always supposed to give us our time back, and then the computer was supposed to give us our time back, and Bitcoin was supposed to deregulate banks around the world and give true, sovereign wealth to people, and that never happened. And the metaverse was supposed to free people into their thoughts and their minds, and the people with disabilities could now fly. And that didn't really happen. So it's different this time. I think the only thing that is really interesting, just to note against each one of these things, the fluff falls away, and then you're left with utility. And that's exactly, I just imagine a shelf, an AI shelf, right? There's been some stuff on it for a long time. Spell checking has been on the AI shelf. Alexa, God bless it, has been on the AI shelf. Whatever really bad voice assistant we've had for the last 10 years, that's been on the AI shelf. It's been sort of okay.
I still can't get my car to get my playlist right.
No, exactly. But but now cars can, broadly speaking, I went in a Waymo in LA last week. Amazing, right? It was underwhelming, the most underwhelming thing from expectation I think I've ever been in. So I went into it thinking this is going to be amazing. I'll be clinging onto the leg rest, and it just drove me to my hotel. And I got to the hotel thinking it's never going to get through that little gap up the little bit at the front of the hotel where the plants are and the fountain. And it did. It went up there and it waited and went, yeah, that was really good. If you're a lorry driver, that's not a great thing. But I think we're getting tools on the tool shelf. So it's doing all the good things that we need. All the bad things that we don't want are sort of in the other bundle, which are hype and bad stuff, which will eventually be legislated against. So, and then it will be illegal. At the moment, it's not illegal, because we haven't figured out what the thing is yet to make it illegal. So I'm just seeing two buckets: tools on the shelf, things like facial recognition cameras. That's on the facial recognition. You're walking through a door, it opens the door for you. It's not recognizing your face, it's recognizing a face. Just going, there's a person there, I'll open the door, bins it straight away. There was nothing even there in the first place. Whereas facial recognition, which is, I've seen you 3 times, I'm going to serve you an ad, or I'm going to tell the police about you, that's something different altogether. So one's a tool, one is probably going to be legislated away, and we don't need to worry about it. So I think in the future, we'll always get to this equilibrium. At the moment, we're properly lopsided, just because it's hitting us thick and fast and legislation can't keep up. And now it is starting to come in.
I mean, you're right, it is lopsided. And I just think, you say nothing's changed, but I think the speed of it, the speed of the hype, the innovation, I've had to unplug a lot from social media, and I found that's really been good for my mental health. Just to go back to thinking again and reading again, and actually not looking at something for a long period of time, not looking at messages. And I'm trying to teach my kids that as well. However, they're native to it. They've grown up with it. Their whole way of thinking is different. The whole way they just can delegate is different. And so I wonder, just to come to a topic of interest that we discussed back in November 2022, where's education going to go with this? What have you seen in the education space that worries you or excites you?
So I'm a forever optimist, but I'm always like I'm the guy who will always point out the things that are going to go wrong.
Yeah.
So I'm always what's the worst that could happen? And literally, no. What is the worst that could happen? I need to know that before I can commit to the good thing. I think with education, I was terrible at school. I think probably if you rerun the old podcast, my whole history is I was bad at school. I just have never really
academically. You mean
academically? Yeah. So great at art. Although, from a relatively brassy family, so art was never really an option. So I had to do graphic design because at least that was commercial.
Got it.
But, there's no chance I was going to end up in a bank. My maths, back in the day, O-levels were the thing, GCSEs, proto-GCSEs, and I got a C, and that was a surprise. It should have been a D, really. So I was terrible at maths, only because it was reciting and remembering, and I'm not a great reciting and remembering type of person. History. I took history because I had a brilliant teacher, yet the next teacher was all about just dates and people. And I'm terrible at names. So it was never great for me. But if you look, even if you go to something like Gemini, there was an experiment a couple of years ago, but if you go to Gemini and you click on the little plus button but just beneath the prompts, it opens up some options. This is like a guided learning option in there. It's like it's in the heart of the model. Basically says like, what are you trying to learn? And how do you want to learn it? What's best for you? And I'll convert the source material into how best for you to learn it.
So textbook, picture book, audio, video.
So the question is like, okay, I always do this kind of extrapolate. It's a great thing. I got my degree in information design, and there's always like, what's the worst that could happen? What's the best that can happen? Somewhere in between is where you need to be. And if there's a danger, then what's the worst danger and what's the least danger? And how do you represent those? And there was always this kind of interplay between worst and least. And I think there's a sort of, extrapolate, then everybody can learn in their own way. Then the question is what are they learning? And then who sets the syllabus?
How is it evaluated?
And how is it evaluated, and what is valuable? And arguably, going to school right now is a Victorian, if not before. It's before Victorian. So going to a school, learning to do a full day's work, and then learning a thing which will give you a trade is very much the workhouse ethic. We don't necessarily need to all now learn one thing so we can be gainfully employed by some sort of boss and going to a business that looks like lots of people staring at the front.
So should I give up blacksmithing?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
No, so I think that's really interesting is if it's not right for everybody, people love structured learning, but for learning for me is imagine, that's another thing. I was on a plane. I always do ask a couple of questions to the person next to you on a plane, and if they take the bait, great. If not, leave them alone. And I was speaking to somebody who's a professor in a university in London, and I thought, that's fascinating. What are you seeing? This was maybe 2 years ago. What are you seeing the difference that AI has shown within learning and your students? They said it's flipped it 180, like almost literally 180 degrees. So what you used to do is you used to learn things in class, you used to pump stuff into people, repeat things, what have you got it? Yes, no, great. Then you tell them to do some homework on their own time. They come in, they do the homework, submit it. Next day, you would tell them some more stuff, do some homework, and then you'd mark it at the end of the week. Now what they do is they can't guarantee that you've not gone home and just asked ChatGPT to do your homework, and you've used all the special, ninja tricks to make it look like not like AI. So they can't guarantee that anymore. So what they've now done is they then say, go away and learn about the topic in the evening. This is the topic. It's, postmodernism and blah, 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 blah. Go and learn about the 3 most important people in postmodernism as far as you're concerned, and find 3 people that nobody will probably have recognized. So you give them some sort of cognitive challenge. And then what they do is they come in the lesson and they then tell everybody their research, which is the lesson. So they've flipped it the other way around.
So it's almost customized to the student, and then it becomes a unique collaboration
well, the learning
rather than
that
a
everybody
broadcast.
hears is what everybody brings back into the room from their research in the evening.
But what I'm saying is the old professorial one that I went to was lecture, acetates, one-way system, broadcast, check, test. You're now saying it's broadcast, receive, collaborate.
Yeah, literally build the
difference.
synapses, not just strengthen the grid that they want you to strengthen by repeating the times table and all those sorts of things. Great, but unless you're going into a financial or some sort of, mathematical area, then reciting the times table is not what numeracy should be about. It should be about, can you get by in life knowing what a water bill is, and
how do you pay your taxes?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
self-assess
And can you pay for the parking meter for the next 3 hours? That's not really there. That was in the olden days of school when you were 5 and 6, and then all of a sudden it became sines and cosines and ATANs. And I can remember when I got a computer, and I don't even know sine tables. If you ever looked at it, you get a calculator and you just start
it was a
typing in
table you had to
one
look stuff
sine,
up.
and it gives you 0.2, 0.3, no, 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 no. You go, okay, what about 2 sine minus 0.9834? Okay, what about 3 sine? 0.32. You go, this makes no difference. And then if you then get a very simple computer program that says get a number that goes from 1 to infinity, or 0.1 to 0.2 to whatever, just count it up. Doesn't matter what it is, and just get the sign of that. Sine of 1, sine of 2, sine of 3, sine of 4, and then just plot it. And it literally is this dot that moves up and almost comes to a stop, and it goes down, and it goes between 1 and -1 beautifully. You go,
so you can visualize
that's what
it.
it's doing, right? Yeah. And then you go, well, if I did that on the x-axis, would it make a circle? And it doesn't. It makes a figure of 8. And you go, oh, so I need like the x-axis to be like a little bit out of sync, which is what a cosine is. It's 90 degrees out, right? And it's only by me just mucking about with it that you get to find these things. So I think that to me is the curiosity of an individual finding something out rather than just being told what it is, because I didn't care.
But it's interesting you used a calculator to figure that out, and the guy next to me used to spell boobs with eights and zeros.
Yeah, I was there as well. Don't worry, yeah.
So you started there.
Yeah, no, but that to me is interesting, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, everything's interesting. You know, but so that's a 7-segment display you're talking about. Why is it 7 segments? You know, well, that's the minimum. You can represent every character from 0 to 10 at 1. You know,
you've made me think. There's a classic cartoon of a teacher sitting in front of a range of animals. Have you seen this before? There's an elephant and a monkey and a fish in a bowl and a range of animals. And he goes, great, to check who's the best this year, we're going to see who can climb that tree. And of course, the monkey looks excited and every animal looks despondent because the test wouldn't allow them. It was a standardized test.
Yeah,
but it sounds to me like, if I've understood you correctly, AI has sort of taken the tree and said, replace tree with something else. You just had it before AI and you used a simple calculator. And do you remember back in the day they told us not to use calculators because we'll never have one in our pocket?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think there's two things. There's curiosity, and I think I don't think it's a luxury. I check myself all the time, you know, working class lad, done well, but I'm still very aware that not everybody has what I've got right now. You know, I could do with a new car. It's knackered. It's 12 years old. But that's just who I am, right? So, but that said, curiosity I think is available to everybody. I think it's knowing that it's valuable is the luxury, and having some feedback that it is useful is also a luxury as well. Not everybody will get that. So, if you are curious all the time and somebody says to you that's pointless, then eventually that'll ebb away. So I think the luxury of having people around you that reward and value your curiosity, I think, is important.
But AI could do that if you're isolated. And
so this is exactly it, right? So where does the curiosity come from and get rewarded? When AI can do that in abundance, as we all know, you know, we always say there's no such thing as a bad idea. Of course there is, right? Drinking bleach is a really bad idea. And ChatGPT might go, what a great idea. You know, in previous versions,
or if it scans Trump's tweets, it'll cure COVID.
Yeah, so now it's becoming a little bit more aware that it shouldn't say everything is good, but it is quite sycophantic. But it is super positive. So that's great. That's great for your curiosity, but it's also really bad for people's sense of rejection because they never get rejected. And there's
so resilience falls away.
Yeah. So there's lots of discourse right now about people they don't want to fail because they just don't even want to have a look at rejection. And the classic is, you know, when you and I were just starting out, you know, there was rejection everywhere. It's like, can I have that? No. Okay. Can I have some more pocket money? No. You know, heaven forbid trying to ask a girl out and they said no, you know, ultimate rejection. You know, can I jump that? No. Okay.
I remember that was just part of life until eventually you get to a yes.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Or a maybe.
You get to a yes or a maybe, and you go, well, that's progress. So I think that's essentially the biggest worry that I have for learning is not learning from the no's and only learning from the yeses.
Too much positive reinforcement.
Yeah,
not
exactly.
Enough negative
So
reinforcement.
I think, and then everybody's a little bit on the tippy toes, not quite sure what negative reinforcement is. You know, being negative is not the same as negative reinforcement. You know, so pointing out where. But we were in a meeting the other day, and one of our directors said, you know, I used to be a tennis coach. And you go, okay, where's this going? You know, well, the thing is, you know, if you try and correct somebody's tennis swing by telling them what was wrong, then you're just telling them what's wrong. If you try and correct it by telling what the benefit of getting it right is, different outcome. So you go, so it's but now parents need to be that. So all of a sudden, parents now need to be the person who is the arbiter of, you know, what is right and wrong and all that sort of good stuff. So that's the problem. And I think the skill that's coming out, which parents are now finding, is being a director. I think storytelling is always a good thing where people say that's the thing you really need. But directing, if you're trying to figure out how to get an answer out of an AI, you need to put it in certain terms that tell it what to do so you get the answer. It's like doing a Google search, right? But a little bit further. So if you can't put together a coherent request, then AI is always going to be a little bit out of reach for you. But that directing is like knowing what you want, knowing how to say it in a way that's going to be persuasive and get the results you want. You know, that's always been a skill that people who have usually the word director or manager, or not necessarily manager, but director after their name, just know how to get the leader, knows how to get the best out of people without necessarily doing anything. They just use words and stories and metaphors and analogies.
And they guide to a desired outcome.
Yeah, but of course we can't have a world where just people tell everybody what to do and
who's going to do the work?
And the last person goes, well, no, and then nobody's ever done anything. But I think that's the big skill, is knowing how to communicate. And if there's anything that's going to come out of this big AI thing, again, leave it 6 months, a year, when we're a little bit further down the line and we've had a little bit more pushback. I think humanity is going to be better for it, because I think we'll take a little taste of the dark side, and I think it'll make us realise what the good side is all about.
I'd love to bank on that.
No, I genuinely. I mean, I did a post, I don't know, last year or so, or not even a post, I think it was on LinkedIn, but I used to do these things called the Dino saws. Actually, they were called the Dino dumps back in the day.
I remember the Dino dumps, and when I realized you weren't talking about your bowels, I understood that this was valuable information.
It was interesting stuff that I'd seen. It was a dump of interesting things. It was great for our clients because they could feel current, and we would be a great agency by keeping them supported.
This is before AI, so all your post-it notes were coming from organic
Dino so
Dino
I'd see
AI.
something go, you need, and on that very first episode, or that very first PowerPoint slide, I think it was Facebook is coming, you need to know about social media. YouTube is just like, you need to know about, cloud videos, and it was literally everything was there, and there was some sort of precursor to Bitcoin and all sorts of stuff was in there. And I thought that was, it was really interesting going all the way back to the day. And then, if you go forwards, we've learned so much. Nothing's really changed at the end of the day, but that Dino dump keeps me on like what's going, and I'm always on the trend. I can always see what's going on. Not always, obviously, that's a little bit sort of assumptive, but I've got a good view of what next year is going to be. I quit Facebook 5 years before everybody else did. I was off Twitter when that was starting to go a little bit toxic, so I could see where it was going, and just the trends in social media and all that. And I've got a relatively good feeling in my water about AI.
All right, let me give you a curveball question. So my circumstances are now that I'm going back into dating. What do you think of AI in dating?
Oof.
What have you seen or observed in that? And not to lead the witness, but I'm starting to notice that dating apps are in decline.
Yeah.
Share prices are down, users are down.
I think it needs a definite action decision. If you just say, I'm not going to use AI, I'm not going to use a dating app, amazing. You'll find the other people who think like that too. If you think you're going to use a dating app, you'll find the other people who think like that too. I don't think there's any place particularly in the world for an AI-driven dating app or a relationship with somebody on AI. I just don't think there's, and all it takes is, I can just have a chat and see, I'll just get some tips and tricks for the date, and then you start having a chat and great. But that's a slippery slope. I think you've got to go, look, when it's like putting your phone down at a family dinner, and some people will always get their phones out, and I'm a little bit fierce about it. Occasionally we use our phones at the table to look up facts because we're always having a conversation.
So it's a fact check too.
So, my children fledged and then came back. So we've got some 20-something children at home. And we always eat together. And our phones are there for looking at facts and just making sure that nobody's made something up. But other than that, we're not just all staring at our phones. So I think we made a commitment to that, and I think dating needs to be a commitment to somebody else. So I would, unfortunately, I'd go organic on dating.
I think so. I mean, what my experience has been, there's all these groups where you can, singles who bike, singles who hike, singles who camp, and there's this big fragmented world. Now, I appreciate you're not in that world, but just from my point of view, the trade-off to apps is groups and finding people who have common interests.
Finding your folk, finding your clan, absolutely 100%.
But that takes commitment to scroll through.
Yeah.
Groups and comments and threads, and of course that I've always found, and maybe that's why you left some of the social media, commenting, threaded comments are just the worst conversation. It's the toilet of conversation.
But people who agree with you and are not necessarily great, obviously. So, but I can remember having a chat with my daughter about the YouTube algorithm when she was absolutely adamant. She was like 6 years old or something, that the most popular video in the world right now was, I don't know, Beanie Babies or something like
Baby
that.
Shark?
Yeah, it was probably before then.
Okay.
And I was like, whoa, hang on a minute. Like, this is my YouTube, and this is what's at number one, when they used to be a number one on YouTube homepage. And she was like, well, why isn't it not the same as mine? We had to have this whole birds and the bees of digital algorithms. And like, you're being manipulated by the media industry to believe something because it serves the ad dollars.
That's a heavy thing to learn at 6.
Yeah, well, but
thank God she had a dad like you.
No, absolutely. I mean, they taught them cybersecurity at school.
Right.
Fine, but really what they completely miss, and still they're starting to get to grips with it, is just the insipid nature of being essentially led by social media and what it can take away from you.
There was someone I was listening to the other day who said, and I've observed this, when I hire and fire people, because I've had to do a lot of that in business, there's a generation coming up now that doesn't like to offend and doesn't like conflict. Whereas I think, as you said, when we came up, conflict was all around. If you're a kid, you came home with skids on, marks on your knees, and you're always out challenging yourself. So I've noticed there's some people that actually understand. It's a bit like, let me reverse. When I was growing up, skiing was the thing. So I grew up on skis. But then snowboarding came along, and suddenly it was all about snowboarding, and it's gone back to skiing. And it seems like our parents' drug, say drink driving, didn't become our drug. And there's a generation coming up now that doesn't drink, doesn't smoke. And maybe that's the benefit of all the advertising in the generation before. But my kids, for example, and I know this is a small survey, don't use social media because they think it's mommy and daddy's drug. They don't like it because they've observed their mother and father on it too much. Yeah, then they're like YouTube, but like you say, they each got different algorithms.
Yeah, there's no such thing as social media anymore, though. I'm fairly strict about this one. It's like there is no social media; it's discovery media. So all of the big platforms have just got an endless scrolling video of probably shorts. It's discovery. There is nobody sharing massive amounts of data with their friends anymore. It's not social at all. So I think that's the thing, is like they're not on social media, but they are now heavily in discovery platforms where the algorithm's even worse. As we all know, this is not new news, but I think that's the big issue for me. Like, set alarms on your phone, but we'll get to a point. We're starting to get to, like, with the under 14 ban, whatever it is, 16 ban on social media, 12.
Yeah.
And Australia, and then we've always had the articles like it's not working, it can't work, and the VPN, all you got to do is get a VPN and circumnavigate it, and then we'll ban VPNs then. You go, okay, well, you can't really do that because businesses need VPNs, but, so in an ideal world, you'd have a phone that, up until 16 has certain limitations on it, that for the good of the person. You'd want hardware in the phone that if there's any dodgy, like literally it's not looking at it, a little bit like facial recognition, it just knows there's dodgy pixels in that image. There are manipulated pixels, and it puts a little, dot on it at the hardware level, so it's not up to the app or the network. These things that you could do right now if you started again, that you would protect people to go, well, it's precious.
So that is the big conclusion here, is the swings and roundabouts are quite wide, but you're not seeing anything new. You're just seeing a recurring...
No, look, is AI going to take your job? The classic cliche is, well, no, but somebody who knows AI better than you will do. And there are certain jobs that, I would say if you're, I heard the other day, if you're a lorry driver, long-distance lorry driver in America, that's not a great job. But there's also there's a great example of if you look at the art movements of the last 2,000 years, you got the Renaissance and like all that sort of good stuff. There were like 9 art movements that we recognise for the first 1,800 years, and up until 1925, let's say, 1825, photography was invented, like early 80s. 1800s, and then all of a sudden everybody went, okay, so what we were driving towards, the goal was artistic purity and realism. So when perspective was discovered, all of a sudden we go, right, this is the next step, and it's going to be real and real and real. And then all of a sudden photography came along and went, no, I'm taking that. And they went, well, right, okay, it's black and white, I guess, but still everything is now captured. Now what do? We're done. All art is now done. And if you then see what happened, you got Art Nouveau, you got, all the constructive, you got the Cubism, you got da-da-da-da-da. And there was something like in the next 30 years, there were like 20 art movements, and in the last 80 years, there've been like 70, you know. And so the artists were like, no, this is our job, is to make things look perfect. And all of a sudden we went, oh, that wasn't our job. That was just like a grudge and a bit of a folly, to be honest. We didn't need to be doing that. We should have been exploring creativity. And there's a great band called Agine de Poitrine. I don't know if you've seen them. They're heart pain, essentially. Canadian band. I mean, amazing. Go and listen to it. Like, look them up. But they've been around for a while, and they've got their own little funky thing. So they've got like a guy who plays double frets on his guitar. On his one of the frets, he's got like notes in between. Like he's got semitones. So music not dissimilar to Asian music, Indian music, but very, very unheard of in Western music. But it's playing like proper like riffs, like proper awesome music. Drummer is playing just different key signatures all the time. So yeah, it was interesting. It sounds really funky. I love it, but lots of people were commenting that this is really hard for an AI to train on because it's changing all the time, and that was exactly the same as the artists as far as I was concerned. It's like, I know they weren't doing it because of AI, but I'd love to see more music coming out of bands that is just different. It's not fall to the floor. It's not, you know, pop
or auto-tune or any of that stuff.
Yeah. So you know, I can just see the little kind of twinkle in the eye of creativity as a counterpoint to AI, which I think is a great thing. So it's always positive.
Well, I keep reading about what could be the future economy in luxury, and it's human provenance. Right, it's a product that is human made and asserted to be, and so AI can be a doctor for $1 and whatnot. But I wanted to come to the final, I think, equation, which is energy, because AI doesn't run off nothing. And is there now competition between using energy to feed crops and eat, or building server farms? You had a great observation on that when we last spoke about. I guess the proportionality of how that works.
Yeah, I think perspective is always a good thing.
Okay.
So when I was doing a little bit of research into it, just going like, I don't know enough about it, so best find, which is how I work, right? Oh, that's interesting. What is that? I'll
flip the stone.
Yeah, I'll just spend 3 hours, you know, just doing stuff. And a really interesting stat, and I'm going to get them slightly wrong, but to run the internet was something like. For 4% of the world's, I think it was 4% of the world's energy to run the internet.
So what do you count as energy? Is energy production for a grid of all different?
Yes, it's everything. So all the servers, the transponders, the backup servers, the cooling. So the internet takes 4%.
Of the grid being the energy grid that is fueled by wind, solar, nuclear, whatever
it
the
does.
energy
Yeah,
grid is.
everything's.
Okay.
No, I think it's 0.4%. So it's not massive.
It's 0.4. Okay, so less than 1%.
Yeah, and hang on, I forgot that. It might be 1.4. It's anyway. Let's just say it's 1.4.
It's
just to
small.
split the middle. It's small, right? That's the internet. It's important. And then if you then take what is AI, a part of data centers. The data centers aren't all the internet.
So this is quantum computing now. This is
just data centers.
Just data centers.
Stuff that keeps, you know, computation going and switches and directs your internet page and keeps all the IP systems going. Fine. And of those, which ones are dedicated to AI? It's actually like 0.3% of the world's resources, but it is growing the fastest of all the things
in terms of consumption rate.
Yeah, so it's small. Like for instance, if you have, I think cardboard boxes are 1.3% of the world's resources, and server farms, AI server farms, are 0.3, and it's similar to if you like coffee, the entire world of coffee, to get coffee to your door, is actually 0.4% of the world's resources. So. You know, in perspective, there are some similar numbers around it, but you wouldn't expect them. And then if you then go, well, what about the water? So I was digging really deep into it, and AI, and again, I'm going to get this probably wrong, but it takes something like 3.5 billion liters of water to cool all of the servers. And then just corn, just in America, uses something, I think it's like 4.8 trillion liters of water. So it's like
orders of magnitude.
It's like 14 times bigger or something like that. And that's
corn
just for corn.
So corn is 14 times bigger in America than global AI.
And that's just corn. Okay. But most of the corn, I think, is used for bioethanol, which is put in cars to drive around. So there are these really interesting stats. As soon as you start bringing them out, like if you've got a fridge freezer running for a year is 1 million ChatGPT prompts. And we've all got a fridge freezer at home running for a year because we don't like switch it off at the weekend. So that's 1 million. I don't know what that works out as a day. That's like I don't know what the maths is. I'm not very good at maths, but 1 million divided by 365. It's a third of a million. Whatever that is, 300, 3,000, 30,000, whatever. There's a 3 there and there somewhere. But that's really interesting that we're all going, every time you do a ChatGPT prompt, a tree falls down. You go, no, it doesn't really. But the other thing is that's only because we go through the ones in the sky. As I said before, you don't need to go through the machines in the sky. There's 2 parts of the machines in the sky is training the models, which is intensely energy inefficient. Once you've got the model, you can't change it. You can't update it real time because as soon as you change one of the little factors in it, it all falls over and it needs to be retrained. So once you've trained your model, it's set, it's done, you start retraining the next model on bits of the old model, but you start again. That training is one thing, and that used to be the biggest part of AI, and now the big part of AI is what's called inference, which is us idiots using it, is the bits that's actually costing the most. So the energy part of it is and as I said, you can download it to your desktop if you really want, and there are some experiments where people literally have a hand-wound little generator where they can only, if they wind it for 13 seconds, they can get a prompt on their local machine. And you go, yeah, that's about right. So, and that's what we should be expecting from AI. It's just what we've been sold and the infrastructure and the NVIDIA chips and all that sort of stuff is part of a big corporate structure that is how it is. That's not really, if we started again.
You don't see it as a threat to resources at the moment.
Obviously, it's, I think in perspective, I think the biggest issue to me is it's not distributed particularly well. So if you then said server farms, and they're all in certain places and they're destroying people's lives and polluting the water in those places. Whereas if you distributed them, there'd be less of an issue. I mean, it'd still be an issue, but there'd be less of an issue. So lots of people go, I don't see what the problem is. Or you try living next to one of them, you'll see what the problem is. So, I think it'd be very flippant to say it's not an issue. It's a massive issue for the people living next to them.
Well, I think in this conversation, we've crossed what's changed in 4 years, which is a hell of a lot. We've talked about values, directives, and now energy. Once you leave this studio, where are you off to next? Are you traveling again? Or what are you working on next?
So I'm off. So So the next interesting trip, I think, will be Pakistan, which would be interesting. That'd be.
What's going to bring you there? What's the initial?
So billboards, bizarrely. One of my other things I do is I'm really passionate about creativity and billboards. So I have the privilege to go to places and talk about billboards and get crowds interested in what the possibilities are and learn from the mistakes of different countries and territories. So that's a great privilege. And I have this really interesting relationship with my sister who's high up in the armed forces. And every time I go somewhere, even remotely spicy, we always have a chat, usually on, Signal. And it usually goes something like, Islamabad, ? And then you just sort of wait like 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, and a reply will come back, which is like, whereabouts are you going after that? So I think that's just become, I've not been a big traveller in my youth. We never went on holiday anywhere other than Wales. And that was it. So I'm not from a travelling family, so to speak, but I've just had the privilege of being invited just to be excited in front of people, excitable in front of people. You've got 2 things that you should be, which is great parental advice. It is you've got to be interesting and interested. That's it. So just try to learn by being interested, you eventually become interesting.
That's a good transition. And by the way, what did your sister say about Shoreditch?
Shoreditch, yeah. Well, yeah, okay. I'm actually 1 street away from where I saw 3 motorbikes get stolen right next to mine about 10 years ago. I know, I was a bit disappointed.
Well, on the way in, somebody, we saw, my colleague and I saw someone get hit by a car. They were okay, but it was like, interesting.
Pretty spicy. Shoreditch. Shoreditch is cool.
Yeah. Well, look, I appreciate you coming back from LA on your way to Islamabad, stopping here. I mean, this has been a very enlightening conversation. Any final thoughts? Or have we covered it, do you think?
No, I think all I'd say is wherever you get your information about AI, then just chill out about it. It's all really about people boosting their share price. So all the scary stuff you're hearing right now is people trying to make it sound like their model is the most important thing in the world. Governments need to listen, and governments and their AI model need to work together closely so they ensure their future. And a lot of that's going on. And if you just unplug that, like nothing happens. Literally nothing happens. Okay, you might need to think about, but children who I've seen flourish are the children who haven't been stuck to their phones. It's not the people who've been stuck to their phones worrying about AI. You know, there'll always be a place for people who need to be together to serve food to people, to pick up potatoes or, you know, whatever it is. So I'm a big humanist. The future is bright.
I hope so too. Thanks for coming through. Appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the SparkHub podcast. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Don't be shy to look in the show notes for a deeper dive, and also consider signing up for our newsletter so that you can get the inside scoop straight to your inbox.